The gathering at Willow Bluff. The morning Grandpa Richard Tanner was found dead, the Alabama summer air hung thick with the scent of pine and dust. A layer of fog still clung to the tops of the pecan trees behind Willow Bluff, the family's ancestral estate nestled on a bluff above a lazy bend in the Alabama River. The land was quiet. Too quiet for a place that once echoed with the barks of hunting dogs and the crack of hammers from decades-old restoration projects. And chicory coffee served in the chipped mug he'd carried home from Vietnam. But when she reached Richard's study, she found the door ajar and the smell of cordite in the air, a ghostly, coppery whisper of violence. It was Miriam Tanner who discovered the body. She'd risen early, as she had every day for 50 years, to prepare her husband's breakfast, 2 eggs over easy, toast with blackberry jam. Then calmly, she set the tray on the side table, crossed herself, and picked up the rotary phone by the door. "You need to come quick. Richard's dead." He wore a sleeveless shirt, a faint bruise on his cheek, and the kind of look that dared anyone to ask where he'd been. She emerged in heels and a linen dress, sunglasses hiding her eyes, lips pursed as if the heat and the sorrow were equally offensive. Her daughter, Avery, stepped out behind her, barefoot the moment the car stopped, her sundress creased from the drive, eyes scanning the house like it was haunted. He stood in front of the cold fireplace, the badge on his chest catching light from the bay window. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, nothing missing that we can see. He was slumped in his leather chair, eyes open but unseeing, a single bullet wound in the center of his chest. No sign of a struggle, no broken windows, just the open ledger on his desk, a pen still clutched in his hand, and a bloodstain spreading across his flannel shirt. Miriam didn't scream. She didn't faint. She stood there, the tray in her hands, trembling slightly as the coffee rippled in the mug. The windows glowed orange with lamplight. From here, it almost looked peaceful. But something in her bones told her she already knew. Almost. He didn't speak when he hugged his mother, just held her for a long, wordless moment. Willow Bluff had always been her sanctuary. She knew every twist in the dirt trail, every rock along the riverbank where she used to read under the sun. But today, even the water seemed to whisper secrets. "Sheriff Briggs," she said when the line connected. By noon, the family had gathered. Rachel Tanner Pierce arrived first, sweeping up the long dirt drive in a black Lexus SUV that didn't belong on country roads. Daniel Tanner came next in a rusted Ford truck, silence trailing behind him like a cloak. Luke arrived last, late, as always. His motorcycle growled up the drive like a threat. They gathered in the den, the one room Richard never allowed food in, and listened as Sheriff Nolan Briggs gave the first official word. "It doesn't look like a robbery," Briggs said, hat in hand. "Better than listening to Mom pretend she's not relieved." Not the fresh, violent kind, but old stains, dried, hidden beneath floorboards and family stories. She dreamed of Richard standing over her, not with a smile, but a judgmental stare. And she remembered something she'd buried long ago. Rachel narrowed her eyes. "So what does that mean? You think she wanted him gone?" Briggs looked at Miriam, then at Daniel, then back to the room. "It means someone he knew might have done it. They're all vultures, picking at his memory before he's even cold." The silence that followed was heavy enough to buckle the floorboards. Willow Bluff buzzed with unfamiliar energy. Boots on the porch, camera flashes in the study, the occasional radio crackle from uniformed deputies wandering through a house built to keep the world out. Later that evening, while Miriam insisted on cooking a roast no one would eat, Avery wandered down to the river. "He'd have hated this," he muttered to Briggs. She sat on the old wooden dock, legs dangling over the edge, and stared at the reflection of the house across the water. Avery whispered, more to herself than the wind, "Who would kill him?" Inside were names, dates, and amounts, large ones, quiet land acquisitions. "Looks like Richard was playing a long game. Shell companies. Your grandfather didn't share things he thought would burden others. Offshore accounts. That ledger. Those numbers." Perched on the hood of his truck, cigarette dangling from his lips, he eyed the reporters who had begun to gather near the edge of the property. That wasn't just hiding money. That was planning for something. "Sheriff, you need to see this." The land ain't safe in her hands. Some things, child, are better left alone. It wasn't the same ledger Richard was holding the day he died. This one had been tucked behind a false panel in the bookshelf. This family's been sitting on secrets longer than that bluff's been standing. She didn't expect an answer. Behind her, a twig snapped. "Are you saying someone in this room?" She turned quickly. Luke stood at the edge of the path, hands in his pockets, watching her, maybe even let them in. But one line stood out clear. "You always come out here when things go bad," he said. Avery nodded. Luke smirked, but there was no joy in it. "I think she's glad she doesn't have to pretend to like him anymore." Luke stepped closer, lowering himself beside her on the dock. Inside was an old cassette tape, labeled in Richard's unmistakable handwriting, "For A." She looked at him. "And what about you? Whatever he built, it's going to destroy us." "I didn't kill him, if that's what you're asking." The bloodstain was gone, but she could still feel its presence. The moonlight through the lace curtains turned everything ghostly. The old tape player in the corner, a dusty relic from childhood, waited in silence. "I didn't ask." Her eyes darted to each face, her uncle's stoic expression, her mother's tightly coiled nerves, Luke's barely concealed rage. He stood. "You didn't have to." And then he walked back up the path, leaving Avery alone with the river and the gathering darkness. "I don't know if what I did will make any sense to you, but I couldn't leave this world without trying to explain. That night in her old bedroom, Avery dreamed of blood. That was a debt paid in silence, and I hated myself for letting you carry it. A secret, choices I couldn't undo. Some things I buried. Some I passed on, hoping they'd never surface. But you saw something, didn't you? The summer you were 12. I saw it in your eyes. You saw me with him." A reason. And Richard had done something. She hadn't seen the act, just the aftermath. Blood on Richard's boots. Calvin's truck left running, door wide open. But Calvin never returned. She woke with a start, heart pounding, eyes adjusting to the pale moonlight spilling through the curtains. And in that moment, Avery Tanner realized her grandfather's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a reckoning. The ledger and the lies. It was for the family. He was going to ruin us. He was going to sell the whole riverfront to Worth. Sheriff Nolan Briggs returned the next morning, this time with a forensics team from Montgomery. Daniel stood on the porch with a steaming mug, eyes narrowed at the men in gloves sifting through Richard's belongings. "Richard made the call. I followed orders." Briggs nodded. "I know, but dead men don't get preferences." Inside, one of the techs called out. Briggs stepped into the study, where the tech handed him a leather-bound ledger, its edges frayed, the paper inside thin and yellowed. The sheriff flipped it open. "I saw you drag something through the woods with him. I just didn't know what it was." Rachel appeared behind him, voice sharp. "What is that?" Briggs didn't answer immediately. At the kitchen table, Miriam sat with her Bible open, staring past the pages. Avery sat beside her, studying her grandmother's face. "Did you know about any of this?" Avery asked softly. Miriam's hands trembled slightly as she closed the book. Avery frowned. Miriam looked at her, eyes suddenly sharp. Luke watched the chaos from a distance. "You better be careful what you dig up," he said aloud to no one. He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his back pocket, a letter with Richard's handwriting. "Luke, you were right about Rachel. The rest of it was smudged, water-stained. If anything happens to me, don't trust anyone who smiles too quickly." Luke crushed the letter in his fist. Briggs convened the family that evening in the parlor. "We found no signs of forced entry, and nothing missing except a revolver from the locked gun cabinet, the one registered to Richard." Daniel blinked. "That cabinet was supposed to be secure." Briggs gave a slow nod. "Someone had the key." Rachel shifted in her seat. "I'm saying," Briggs interrupted, "that this wasn't random. Richard knew who killed him." Avery's heart thundered in her chest. And then, to her own hands, trembling in her lap, she whispered, "We're not going to survive this." Rachel snapped, "What did you say?" Avery looked up, suddenly clear. That night, Avery returned to the study. She waited until the house was quiet, then slipped inside and shut the door behind her. She walked to the desk and opened the top drawer. She held it like it might burn her. Then she took a deep breath, tucked it into her pocket, and turned off the light. Shadows and revelations. Avery didn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the cassette tape resting on her chest like a stone. Finally, she sat up, walked across the room, and pushed the tape in. Richard's voice crackled to life. "Avery, if you're hearing this, then I'm gone." There was a pause, then a sigh. "When your father and aunt were young, I made choices to protect this family." Avery's breath caught in her throat. "You saw me with Calvin Ross, and you knew what I did." The tape ended in a soft click. Avery sank to the floor, tears hot on her cheeks. She had seen it. Calvin Ross, a local contractor, had come to threaten Richard about the land. She was 12, and she'd said nothing. The next morning, Avery found Daniel on the porch, watching the sun rise. "I need to talk to you," she said. He didn't look at her. "About what?" "About what I saw. About Grandpa. About Calvin Ross." His silence stretched. "I saw you help him," she said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "So you buried a man?" "I buried a threat." Avery stepped back like she'd been slapped.